Russia's big breakthrough in Pokrovsk has already been rolled back by Ukraine's elite brigade. Just how did the Ukrainians contain the big Russian breakthrough so quickly? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. By the way, hit that subscribe button, guys. You guys know that I've changed my format, and boy, a lot of people are real mad about it. So if you appreciate it, again, that subscribe button doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps me out. Okay, so you may note here, this map looks a little different than it did just a few days ago. We talked about how yesterday, the 15th, or really 2 days ago, Russian forces, what was initially reported as a breakthrough, Russian forces extending nearly 13 kilometers, sometimes in places even a little more, into Ukrainian territory. But what's notable about this is, as we talked about, this is not really a strategic decision because the Russians have been fighting steadily, creeping towards the encirclement of the city of Pokrovsk. And certainly Pokrovsk seems inevitable that it's going to have some level. The Russians are going to eventually encircle it because they have, a tremendous material advantage, and Ukraine is focusing on casualties over territory. And so it seems kind of weird that this quote breakthrough unquote is an action that is directly away from Pokrovsk. In fact, literally it's virtually the opposite direction of where the Russians need to be going, right? Again, if you're Russian advances, you need to be going down towards Pokrovsk, towards this encirclement. And instead, they went on an almost 180-degree angle in the wrong direction. And so it sort of makes sense that the Ukrainians were like, hey, we weren't really expecting an attack from here because, well, an attack from here doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense in a political sense, and war is a political animal first and foremost. So the reason it makes sense is because going into Putin's meeting with Trump, he wanted to be able to sort of flood the commentator zone with a symbolic victory to say, look, we Russians, we've staged a big breakthrough on the Ukrainians, and that the Ukrainians are clearly on their last legs. But the problem is that, well, the Ukrainians aren't actually on their last legs, and Russia is not really staging breakthroughs because they literally can't from an operational perspective, because a breakthrough is two parts. It is breaking through the enemy's lines, and it is exploiting that with a series usually of armored assaults or some kind of highly mobile assault group. The problem is that Russia can't create the second part because of the absolute flooding of the battlefield with drones and the use of artillery systems, HIMARS, ATACMS. Any gathering of any size of armored forces or even a mass infantry assault is going to be detected by these drones long before it reaches any kind of front line. It's going to be detected kilometers before arriving at the front. And so this is doubly true of a sort of breakthrough exploitation, right? Because you would have to gather 15, 20 tanks. That's going to take time. And remember, those tanks need logistics. So even if somehow magically you could Star Trek transporter some tanks into the very edge of this breakthrough, the worst possible scenario for Ukraine, those tanks would need fuel and ammunition, right? Their troops would need medical supplies. New crews and new tanks would have to find a way to get to the fighting position. Well, Ukrainian FPV drones can slice these things apart because, as we know, fiber optic drones have a range of now up to 30 kilometers, but 10 kilometers is considered basically the minimum. And so Ukrainian positions, literally even a Ukrainian as far away as possible from the breakthrough could still strike them. And boy, if you are a Ukrainian FPV crew, you can literally sit 5 or 6 kilometers from Russian positions and still just piece them up with your fiber optic drones. So there would be no possible way that this breakthrough could get exploited. That's why we're seeing exactly what you would expect, which is very quickly the Ukrainians simply cutting this offensive action up, surrounding the troops, eliminating them. The biggest problem is, again, that it's required the Ukrainians to pivot towards an offensive action, but this is so one-sided. it's so difficult. These troops had to have known they were being sent on a one-way mission and that they were never going to really come back. There was never going to be a scenario where they were reinforced. There was never going to be a scenario where they were medevaced. Once they made it more than 10 kilometers from the main body of Russian forces, there was never really going to be a scenario where they came out on top. So the Ukrainians, again, reportedly, reportedly this was the Azov brigade that was deployed here, and the situation, again, the entire time it was described as chaotic. Deep state maps that Russian forces quickly established positions and are trying to accumulate troops for further advances. Right now, Deep State said that left unchecked, the assault placed the city of Pokrovsk in greater threat of encirclement, which is literally not true. It's literally in the complete wrong direction. But I think Zelensky was exactly correct in stating that the timing of the offensive was just it was bound to fail and bound to get rolled back. But it was about proving to Russia, or making a statement sort of on the international sphere, right? And what I think was even more interesting is, again, that you can see this has been described as already being contained. Ukraine's Army General Staff said much of the fighting was in progress along the length of this Russian penetration, and Russian troops had launched assaults over the much of the salient. And we saw that yesterday, right? We saw that Russian troops really had not let up any of their assault efforts. But you can see here, right, Russian troops also committing to a very standard kind of steady, progressive assault operation with. You've got Ukrainian forces kind of rolling it back. In fact, this is the only place where the Russians aren't really doubling down on their efforts. And it's fairly obvious why. It's because this is not actually part of the Russian main effort. The main Russian effort, again, is the encirclement and driving out of Pokrovsk. So this is just an example of a really of politics. I'm saying politics trumping combat, but that's not accurate because war is a political animal, right? And as we're seeing this now more transparently than ever, because essentially the fight now is each side wants to force the other one to be in a less tenable political position in order to get them to agree to more favorable negotiated terms, right? Both sides have laid out their stance on what they want to see. As I always point out, Ukraine much closer to at least the international consensus and even President Trump's vision, where Ukraine has said, listen, we can declare a ceasefire today on the existing front lines, and we will then have sincere, genuine peace negotiations over the future of the territories, the country, over any number of other things. But the Russians have said, no, in order to get that ceasefire, not a peace deal, a ceasefire, Ukraine has to commit to withdrawing its forces basically away from all of its prepared defensive positions, which only makes sense if your plan is to continue the invasion because, well, it's sort of like saying, hey, I'm going to I broke into your house, but now I've negotiated me to leave your house. But as a condition, I actually need you, the owner of the house, to not install a lock on your door. And you go, well, you're obviously going to come back in because that's why you care about the lock on the door. And again, in this case, Putin goes, no, that's crazy. That's crazy. I just don't want to feel threatened by you having all these locks on your doors. You go, they're not a threat if you stay in your house and I stay in mine. Like a lock can't be used for that. It doesn't make any sense. So again, this is, again, from Channel 13. I can't really play the video because I think it's combat footage. But again, Azov Brigade, one of Ukraine's best brigades in the National Guard, deployed to take out these Russian invasion groups. But it's not really, by most accounts, it has not been an exceptionally difficult operation, solely by virtue of the fact that, again, there was never a breakthrough in the military sense that we talk about. And we've heard from numerous other sources that right now, due to the absolute flooding of the zone by these fiber optic drones, unjammable fiber optic drones, that the gray zone, so to speak, the area of the front line where there is effectively a no man's land, is up to 10 kilometers deep. So in some ways, yeah, the uncontested zone, right? If you use the Russian border right now, it says, oh, it's only a kilometer long gray zone. It's not. I think it's probably closer right now to 10 plus kilometers, which makes this Russian breakthrough less of a stunning act of military prowess by Russia, and more about like a weird quirk. Imagine if World War I, 2 or 3 dudes crossed no man's land, threw a hail of bullets, and landed in the other trench. You'd go, damn, you guys are lucky as hell. You certainly wouldn't say, oh, look at this. It's a breakthrough. You would never characterize that as a breakthrough. You characterize it as weird, dumb luck. And I think that's what we have here. Again, this isn't to say that like the Ukrainians aren't facing manpower shortages, that there's not a very porous front line, that this is like everything is fine and okay and good to go. None of that is necessarily true, but it's important to put what's happening into context. And it should be taken not as like the ominous sign that you might think it is. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Do hit that subscribe button, but also if you want to support the channel and get access to exclusive uncensored combat videos like the stuff on Channel 13 and even stuff sent to me from units on the front lines, you want to support me and become a member at combatvetnews.com. The link is in the description below. And, oh, by the way, if you want to actually aid the units who are doing this fighting, you want to donate to our fundraiser. We're partnered with Ukraine Aid Ops, which, by the way, your fundraiser is going to count for double because of an anonymous donor in the Netherlands. So definitely check that out. The link to all this is in the description. See you in the next one. Cheers.